All right. Welcome everyone. Today is October 18th, 2022. This is a special meeting of the Cupertino City Council. It is 5 p.m. and we're having this special meeting before our regularly scheduled meeting of October 18th. And so, Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct the roll call?
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Way.
Here.
Councilmember Willie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow is not here yet. And Mayor Paul.
And I'm here. Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. And I did hear from the Vice Mayor. She is on her way from work in downtown San Jose and should be here very briefly. Tonight, in the first item under our special meeting that falls under ordinances and action items, the subject is an amendment to Title 16, Buildings and Construction of the Cupertino Municipal Code, adopting the California Buildings Standards Code and Fire Code as mandated by the state of California, and making local exceptions to those standards as warranted. I believe, Madam City Manager, that we have a couple of building officials for the presentation. Would you care to introduce them?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Paul. We have the pleasure of having Albert Salvador, the Chief of Building Official and also Assistant Director to Community Development Department, to walk us through the high-level summary of the Building and Fire Code update. Albert?
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen here. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. I believe Vice Mayor is going to join us and council members. Albert Salvador, Assistant Director, Community Development. Tonight, we're here to present the state-mandated code adoption for the 2022 triennial edition of the California Code of Regulations, otherwise known as Title 24. A couple of you went through the same process adopting the 2019 codes, so you might be a little familiar with this. But if you're not, each jurisdiction in the state of California is mandated to adopt the state codes every 3 years. So we have tonight several people who worked hard on this ordinance, and we're all available should you have any questions related to it. We have Andre DeVort, our sustainability manager, as well as Zoe Elizabeth and Peter Misasic from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. If you had any questions with the REACH codes and the Cal Green codes. We also have Sean Hatch and Monica Diaz if you had any questions related to the building codes and the property maintenance codes. We also have tonight Chief Hector Estrada and Rob Campbell from Santa Clara County Fire Department if you had any questions related to the fire code. So let's get started. Let's see here. I'm just gonna, as required by the Health and Safety Code, we're here to adopt the 2022 California Code of Regulations. My screen isn't moving, sorry. There it goes. So the Building Standards Codes is located in Title 24, California Code of Regulations, and it's made up of 12 parts, and it's considered a broad set of requirements for construction and maintenance, fire life safety, accessibility, sustainability, as well as structural, plumbing, mechanical, electrical for all buildings and structures in California. Along with the state mandated codes, each jurisdiction adopts local amendments necessary to address local geological, topographical, and climatic conditions. Cupertino's local amendments are mainly carryovers from previous code cycles. However, I will highlight some changes in this presentation. The local amendments are discussed through local building and fire code groups and committees and endorsed by most every jurisdiction in our area in order to maintain a consistent set of regulations throughout the county. So the building code amendments were developed by our tri-chapter uniform committee group, and our fire code amendments were developed by the Santa Clara County Fire Marshals Association and endorsed by Santa Clara County Fire Chiefs Association. And the local amendments to our all-electric REACH codes and green building standards codes were driven by Silicon Valley Clean Energy through the Bay Area REACH Codes Initiative. 1602, this was considered in the past our administrative code. It had a lot of administrative requirements, but they were found in the building codes. What we did this code cycle, we moved all those administrative code sections into the building code chapter. And now this chapter is dedicated just to adopt the 2022 administrative code without any local amendments. There are some changes made to chapter 1628, and it was updated to reflect changes made to our ordinance to comply with AB 1236 to establish an expedited permit process for electric vehicle charging stations. So you might be familiar with this. The ordinance was introduced to you all at the October 4th council meeting, and tonight it's going to be brought in front of you as a second reading. And let's see. And actually, this ordinance brings the city of Cupertino in full compliance with both AB 1236 and AB 970 by creating an expedited, streamlined process for EV charging station permit applications. Chapter 1632 is where the all electric reach codes will reside now. It's as a reminder, the reach codes were adopted by City Council in 2019, and it used to be included in the Energy Code, Chapter 1654. So what we did this code cycle, we actually separated the Energy Code from the reach codes, and we just put it in its own chapter. And we felt it would help make the compliance and enforcement of these requirements a little bit easier, but there was no substantive changes made to the reach codes this time around. Next chapter is 1640. This is where we adopt the 2022 California Fire Code with amendments. And these amendments have been provided to all cities within Santa Clara County Fire District, Fire Department jurisdiction, which includes Campbell, Los Gatos, Los Altos Hills, Saratoga, and Montecito, and it will be included in each of their cities' code adoption package for consistency of enforcement. Chapter 1642 is where we adopt, it's a new chapter where we adopt the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code. And the Property Maintenance Code is just another tool for City of Cupertino to establish minimum property maintenance standards that contain clear and specific property maintenance and improvement provisions. We believe the code will help staff effectively ensure properties are maintained healthy and safe, and that standardized living conditions are provided in Cupertino. 1658 is another chapter that I'm highlighting. This chapter not only adopts the 2022 California Green Building Standards Codes, but it also incorporates local amendments developed through the Bay Area Reach Code Initiative. So most notably, this chapter is where the electric vehicle charging station reach codes were reside, and it was adopted by City Council in 2019. And again, it includes updates developed by Silicon Valley Clean Energy and the statewide reach code project. There's also cleanups made to this chapter due to the changes in the 2022 code cycle. Next. All right, timelines, next steps. So the 2022 California Code of Regulations were published on July 1st, 2022. For the Health and Safety Code, the California Building Standards Commission adopts the state codes 180 days after publication. So that means the state codes will become effective on January 1st, 2023. So the Health and Safety Code not only mandates the city to adopt the state codes, but the approval of our local amendments shall become effective at the same time the state codes become effective. So tonight, October 18th, we're here presenting the first reading of our codes. The second reading will be put in front of you on November 1st, 2022. And this will give us enough time for our local amendments to become effective on or before the January 1st, 2023 deadline. So recommended action, conduct a reading of this ordinance, amending these chapters of our Cupertino Municipal Code. Oops. All right. And also adopt a resolution making factual findings with respect to local geological, topographical, and climatic conditions. And also find the project is exempt from CEQA. With that said, I'm going to open up for questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Albert. And I'll go ahead and move to our members of the public. If anyone here has a question or comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom function. And we will also take blue cards for anyone here live. In the time that the first person is speaking, or roughly 3 minutes, please also, if you have email comments that you would like to have read in the record by our city clerk for up to 3 minutes, email cityclerk, that's all one word, at cupertino.org. And so I don't see anyone with their hand raised in Zoom right now. Madam City Clerk, are there any blue cards from the public here?
No, Mayor.
Okay, and so let's do this. I read the time at about 5:12. I'll check back in at 5:15 in case anybody emails or submits a blue card, and we'll go ahead and bring this back to the dais. Is there anybody from council who wishes to ask a question at this point, or would like to deliberate on this item number 1 in our special meeting? So I see Councilmember Willie, and I will let the members of the public know that we are all on the dais tonight. That's not something that will occur throughout the entirety of the evening. We're still under the governor's orders for the permissibility of having hybrid meetings. And so with regard to the presence of the 5 council members on the dais, that will happen until the end of ceremonial items for our regular meeting. And then per our usual practice during these times, we'll have 3 people on the dais after that. So Councilmember Willie, you have a question or a comment at this time?
Yeah, question. Thank you, Albert. Pretty good run through. The question I've got, I've anxiously been waiting for the update to the Reach Code 2.0. So, because you went so fast, I just want to be sure that my thinking is correct. So, the update to our Reach Code 2.0 that's required for the update of the building codes is included in this ordinance that we're now doing.
Yes, I'm going to turn it, thank you, Councilman Bully, for that question. I'm going to turn it over to Andre to respond to that.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. Andre Dervort, manager of the Sustainability Division. Great question. Reach Code 2.0, just to clarify, is what we've termed an effort to look at extending our existing Reach codes out to existing buildings. So you'll recall in 2019, we adopted a Reach code that's focused on new construction for the all-electric requirement. At this time, we're not extending any requirements for all-electric to existing buildings. That's an effort that we still need to undertake with the help of our regional partners at SBCE. So this is a simple continuation of the existing Reach codes with just minor cleanup items. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. The comment then that I would make is that, in our monthly meetings for Silicon Valley Clean Energy, they show us the table, if you will, of all of our cities surrounding us and their status. And so I've been anxiously waiting for ours, pretty much knowing it was going to be coming tonight. There's a couple that are slightly ahead of us that have already adopted the updates, but by far we're definitely at the leader of this. I think we're number 3 out of 12, 13, 14, something like that. So thank you for keeping us in the forefront. The one other question, the EV chargers. I think our last meeting we had the ordinance for streamlined permits for the EV charging. And so is that part of this, or was that standing on its own because it's permitting process versus the EV charging that you referred to in this update?
Albert, would you like me to take that as well?
Oh, yeah, we can talk about chapter 16, 28, and yeah, you can.
Sure. Yeah, just to clarify, that pretty much stands on its own.
Okay.
We heard the first reading of that at our last council meeting, and it's a related effort, but different than the triennial update to the building codes. This is a permit streamlining ordinance that you'll hear a second reading of later this evening.
Great.
And we include it in the packet just for clarity.
Great. Thank you very much. I think I'm good.
Great. Thanks, Councilmember Woolley. And I'll check in with our city clerk again. Madam City Clerk, do we have any emails or blue cards? I don't see any hands raised in Zoom.
No, Mayor.
Okay, great. So that will close out the public comment on this item 1. And so are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues on council before we entertain a motion on this item 1? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Would anyone like to bring forth a motion? And I would suggest there is a recommended action encompassing a first reading of an ordinance, a resolution, as well as an exemption and a finding that the project is exempt from CEQA. Would anyone like to make that default motion as recommended in the action? Vice Mayor Chow.
Actually, I have a question first. Yeah,
So Vice Mayor Chow.
I have a question regarding, so after we adopt this tonight, for projects that's ongoing, does this newly adopted code apply to them? And how does the application, which project applies or not?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yep. Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question, Vice Mayor Chow. The effective date of the ordinance is January 1st, 2023. So any building permit applications submitted before January 1st does not need to comply with the new standards. Any applications submitted after January 1st, 2023 will have to comply with the new 2022 California codes.
So this is the date when the application is complete?
This is the date that
when
the app
it's initially submitted?
initially submitted.
Initially submitted. And how are we planning to communicate this to the citizens or consultants who are working for citizens on building permits?
Again, a great question. We have this problem every 3 years. We usually post it on our website, and we also have, we post it at the counters, even though COVID had our counters. We don't have a lot of people coming, visiting our counters right now, but we're going to rely on our website right now to post the new code, the new standards,
So
and the effective date of the new standards.
do we have an existing email list? People subscribe to this kind of potential muni code change related to building code standards currently?
I see.
We don't currently. There are a lot of contractors and developers who, people we haven't worked with before, people who live outside of the city, people who live outside of the state. So we don't-
Albert, I see, just let me interject real quick. So I see our city manager has a hand raised in Zoom.
Oh,
so
yes.
yeah,
All
let,
right.
let me go on to
Yeah.
Pamela here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Paul and Vice Mayor Chow. So as Albert mentioned, this is a routine update, so we don't typically email those who have past practice with us. Usually the state actually notify those who are licensed architect or licensed civil engineer. So most of the people in the industry know about the updates. We usually proactively put posters or handouts on the website at the front counter for those who don't normally do this on a normal basis, come in and see it and they'll understand. Typically in my background on December 31st, you see a slew of people coming in, try to take advantage of the current code and before January 1st. But this is a routine exercise that we do every 3 years, but we don't normally email to, we don't have a list of emails.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. And I'm happy to make the motion for the staff recommendation.
Okay, so just to
That-
clarify, Vice Mayor Chow moves the first reading as well as the resolution and finding that the project is exempt from CEQA. I'll go ahead and ask the city clerk to conduct the first reading after we get a second. And I saw Councilmember Moore, your hand was raised. Did you want to second this motion?
Yes, second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second on the table. Before we get to Councilmember Willie's comment on this as part of deliberation of the motion, let's go ahead and have the city clerk conduct the first reading of ordinance number 22-2245.
I shouldn't have my question first.
Let's get the first reading read, and then we can have deliberation.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 22-2245, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, amending chapters 16.02, 16.04, 16.06, 16.16, 16.20, 16.24, 16.28, 16.32, 16.40, 16.42, 16.54, 16.58, 16.62, 16.64, and 16.68 of Title 16 of the Cupertino Municipal Code, adopting the California Building, Residential, Electrical, Mechanical, Plumbing, Energy, Fire, Historical Building Code, Fire, Existing Building Code, Green Building Standards Code, Reference Standards Code, Uniform Housing Code, and Property Maintenance Code, with certain exceptions, deletions, modifications, additions, and amendments.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And so that is the reading of the ordinance, and we have the motion on the table for an omnibus motion of these three recommended items. Now we have Councilmember Willie, who had a hand raised to, I believe, make a comment or question on this motion. Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, back to a question. You know, I think it's great what Vice Mayor asked. You know, when we're actually changing something and people in our community, whether they're contractors or residents, you know, may worry about, oh my gosh, I got to get my permits in before the end of the year so I don't have to make these changes. So the question that I would ask is it, you know, it's mainly administrative, but if Albert could kind of hit on any significant key points, and by this I mean, if my memory and my understanding is correct, you know, like Sunnyvale requires sprinklers inside of residential houses for new construction. I don't think we're adding anything dramatic like that, because that would actually really cause an additional requirement for somebody who was already pretty far along in getting their structure designed and built. So maybe hit on, if there are one or two significant ones that a homeowner or a contractor would have to worry about?
Yeah, there's actually no significant changes to the residential fire sprinkler requirements. There is one exception that was added to the fire code to waive fire sprinklers for temporary structures. So you have those temporary trailers that before the waiver for these types of trailers was less than 1,000 square feet. Now we bumped that up to temporary trailers less than 2,500 square feet and not permitted for more than a year. We exempted those types of uses because we felt that based on the use, you know, the less hazard type of use, we felt that it was appropriate to waive these types of uses from fire sprinkler requirements. I think that's the only major change. There wasn't any significant change to residential fire sprinkler requirements.
So maybe one other question that just kind of pops into my head. You know, ADUs are a pretty big item going forward. We got SB 9 out there and stuff. With this update, is there anything that would be added to the ADUs requiring additional features, requirements, or things of that nature that might be a surprise to somebody who is thinking simple, ADU, you know, buy one of these kits or pre-made ones? Is there anything that would be a surprise to them? Thanks.
Again, the requirements haven't changed, but I can reiterate what those requirements are from last code cycle. For detached accessory dwelling units, fire sprinklers are waived as long as it's clearly defined as an accessory dwelling unit for the government code. And as long as the existing residence doesn't have fire sprinklers, and as long as the detached accessory building is less than 1,200 square feet, and of course, as long as the ADU is on the same property as the main building, and also it meets the what the fire department considers adequate water supply and apparatus access. And those requirements were actually not part of the previous code cycle. So there has been no change, but I just wanted to remind you what the requirements are. And I think the contractors and designers are well aware of our requirements.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Woolley. I have a brief question, and I think this is probably more administrative, and so I'll direct this to our city manager. So the functionally last day to submit a project before the end of the year, would that be December 23rd, a Friday? Because I know that, right, this year Christmas falls on a Sunday, and then we're generally off for that last week in December. So I'm not sure if City Hall will even be open. And then further, putting a wrinkle into that equation is that sometimes on Friday, City Hall may or may not be open to the public. So effectively, should people kind of circle the date of December 22nd on their calendars, or what would be the best information to provide to the public here?
Great question, Mayor Pauls. I'm looking at my calendar. The City Hall is closed from December 23rd to January 2nd. So for those of you who are thinking of submitting, 22nd of December will be the last day.
Okay, so Thursday is December 22nd.
That is true.
So there's no way to submit any kind of placeholder online through any kind of system that we have. We would have to have someone go in physically to City Hall on the 22nd. That will be functionally the last day to submit a project. Is that correct?
That I don't know. I would defer that to either Albert or Ben.
Okay.
I know that certain applications have been accepted online. So whether or not that application can be received during the holiday, Albert and Ben, do you have any idea?
Okay, sure, great prompt. So I see both Ben and Albert. So gentlemen, take your pick as to who goes.
I'll start, Albert. You can back me up. So we, electronic submittals are always encouraged, and they'll remain that ability to submit up to, I think, December 22nd. We have been closing the counter in the submission process during the City Hall closure. Hope that answered your question. If not, we can have to follow up.
Okay, well, that does sound like December 22nd would be the last day, as opposed to the last day of the calendar year, or December 31st. So Albert, seeing no motion or sound, or hearing no sound, I'll go ahead and take that as our definitive answer. Folks out there, if you have a project that you'd like to fall under the earlier current codes and resolutions, please try to have it submitted by December 22nd, Thursday, before that last week of December. Otherwise, our new codes are going to be, if this passes second reading next time, if it passes first reading this time, they're going to be in effect on the first of the year next year. So, Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to make a comment at this time before we call for a vote?
Just wondering whether, as a courtesy, the notices should point that out as the effective date to submit application. Sorry.
So we could definitely add that to the website, and also the reminder at the front counter to have applications submitted by December 22nd.
Okay, sounds workable. And I don't see any further indicators or hands raised. Let's go ahead then and take a vote. I will kind of gently prompt my colleagues if anyone has a disagreement with any item on this omnibus motion, then it might be a good time to so indicate. Otherwise, we will be voting on the entirety of this set of recommended actions. All right, Madam City Clerk, could you please conduct a roll call vote?
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. And it occurs to me, given the fact that we're all on the dais, we could have used our lights actually, technically, but force of habit. So let's go ahead. I think we're making good time on this. We had allocated roughly half time for each of these items. So item number 2 under the special meeting is to consider program and funding revisions for the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 capital improvement programs or CIP project, the City Hall Annex. And that's located at 10455 Torrey Avenue. Those are colloquially improvements to that building that we purchased. And so the presenter, Madam City Clerk, I believe, is Susan Michael, the Capital Improvement Programs Manager. And so in the interest of time, let me introduce Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me put this on the screen. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes, it's visible. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and members of the public. I am Susan Michael, CIP Manager. We have a short presentation on the progress of the City Hall Annex CIP project at 10455 Torrey Avenue. The outline for the presentation tonight will review the existing conditions very briefly, then review the program of the property, then the addition of the EOC program, and conclude with your consideration of 2 contract actions. So the existing conditions. On June 7th, Council had a study session to have an update on this CIP project and award the contract for the project's design services. The existing photos and existing plans were shared at that time, so we'll go through this section rather quickly. These photos show the exterior of the building. It's on the corner of Torrey and Pacifica. It's worth noting, these are the interiors, some of the interior shots. It's worth noting that the building is not currently code compliant in a number of ways, and it's outdated since it hasn't been touched since the 1970s, and it's not conducive to flexible uses since it's a sea of offices. And some more interior photos. This is upstairs in the attic, bathroom, a typical office. So this is the site plan. There are 22 parking spaces. The entrance to the front door needs to be improved so that it can be made accessible. This might affect the layout of the parking, but not greatly. The work we are doing to the building does not create a code requirement for additional parking. And this shows the off-street parking. Street parking is available on Torrey Avenue and on Pacifica south of Library Field. And this is the existing floor plan. There are 19 offices and 1 conference room. There's bathrooms, a staff kitchen, and reception area and lobby. There's also a second floor. It's not really a floor, it's more of an attic space. Because of the sloping roof, most of the space isn't tall enough to be used as an inhabitable story. There is 1 conference room on this level, which we plan to repurpose. The programming. One of the 3 recommended actions for tonight asks Council to confirm the direction of the program for the building. So as we discussed in previous meetings, we'll proceed with the programming, design, and construction of the building as the interim city permit center. And we're bringing a new component to Council for consideration to also include the Emergency Operations Center, EOC, in the program for this location. Programming during the building phase of a project is when you evaluate the needs of the users and figure out how those align with the potential of the space. So we have 130 people, staff, working out of City Hall presently. We interviewed each department to more fully understand their operational needs. One of the takeaways is that the public-facing business functions of City Hall fall into 2 main groups: the permit center, and then a C-suite, executive suite, community meetings function. The permit center and public counter function can fit quite nicely into the annex building, but the C-suite requires more offices than the Torrey Avenue building can accommodate. So we're in the programming phase of the design services presently, and to facilitate that, the designers drew up this diagram floor plan. You can see at the entry over here on the right, we're planning to extend the lobby to the exterior by adding a trellis and some exterior benches. Once you come inside the front door, we've got a public counter with five positions. And then there's 2 conference rooms to the side, as well as a public computer and a public bathroom. If you go past the counter in the back of house area, there's 20 seats here, workstations, and then there's 8 more stations further back. To the sides of the center space, you've got various sizes of meeting rooms. We're trying to make those flexible so that it can be used for an office or a meeting room, whatever the operational needs are at the time. There's also bathrooms here. We've got shower rooms because everybody wants to ride their bike these days. And EOC storage is down here. There's more storage and print rooms, and there's also an employee break room. And we're trying to open up and use the existing outdoor space as a patio. So it's interesting to note that the center space is in this plan open to the roof rafters, so that you can easily pivot that space. It's open, and the only thing really that's there is furniture, so that you can use this space in different ways as we go forward, trying to keep as flexible as possible. So if we go up the stairs to the second floor, not really a floor, we're repurposing the room upstairs with 5 to 7 workstations and some storage and IT HVAC closets. The balcony at this location is also a great feature to overlook the double height space below. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. Presently, when you walk in the front doors, you've got a vaulted lobby space, and immediately your first thought is, wouldn't it be great if we could open it up and just have a very kind of nice cathedral ceiling? So we're trying to do that. There will be some columns and beams, but we're going to open up as much as possible. There is one wall between the lobby area and the back of house, and we're going to use as much glass as possible there. So the EOC. For the EOC, when we were considering the program requirements of City Hall in the City Hall project subcommittee meetings, council members Moore and Willie asked us to consider alternate locations for the City Hall EOC. We looked at 7 locations in the city's facility portfolio and evaluated them based on EOC functionality, available space, and the cost of a renovation project to implement it. We quickly figured out that moving the EOC to the City Hall Annex would be the most cost-effective solution. Spatially, it works well with the building footprint configuration and size, and the adjacency to City Hall allows for a quick deployment of EOC staff and leadership in the course of an event. So building the EOC into the program now makes the city better prepared for a seismic event or other public crisis. Having a purpose-built EOC is an investment that reflects the council and staff's priority of the health, safety, and well-being of the residents. Also, adding the EOC scope to City Hall Annex project will reduce the cost and complication of the City Hall project. Furthermore, the deletion of the EOC from the City Hall program could allow for better uses of the City Hall building and hopefully allow the renovated City Hall to exist within the present footprint without needing to expand. So the City Hall Project Subcommittee reached the conclusion that relocating the EOC to the City Hall Annex building would be beneficial to the EOC and the city for the functional efficiency and long-term viability. So let's have a look at how the EOC may function in the building. The EOC is quite straightforward and programmed in some ways. It acts as basically a communication hub in the course of an event. Various teams come here and operate out of this space. So in that case, these 20 desks would flip to become the EOC. Would use those desks. And these red lines are also locations that we can place the monitors that you may have seen at City Hall. Those are used for the communications. And the rooms that are off to the side, the conference rooms, those are great breakout rooms because the EOC functions as teams. There's a logistics team, management team, a financial team. So those teams can go off to the side and have a talk if they need to. The EOC storage is located back here, so that's easily mobilized in the course of an event. And if you go upstairs, this area can work really well to have an overview of the space below, so we could use those desks and that area for the EOC management, or however the EOC managers want to use it. So I also wanted to note here that the additions to the building design are really an upgrade to the structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and IT systems so that the building doesn't collapse in a seismic event, but it also remains operational. So you have to upgrade the infrastructure to make sure that it does that. In the terms of the day-to-day operations of the building, however, the main difference that you'll see is the addition of the monitors. The rest will be rooms and furniture that can function both as the permit center and the EOC when needed. And so this shows some comparisons. Right now, this is City Hall, and these should be relatively correct in terms of comparison size. City Hall is about 1,400 square feet right now. The new annex will be just slightly larger, but similar. The service center is our backup EOC location, and it's half the size. We also have here the plans for the new Sunnyvale EOC. It's currently under construction. That city is about twice as large as Cupertino, has more services, public safety services in the city. So it basically is another confirmation that we're on the right path for this size in this city of Cupertino. So this table shows the very rough order of magnitude cost estimates, otherwise known as ROM cost estimate, that we derived with our cost management consultant. The different options considered are listed here. There were 7 different locations as well as different options at City Hall. And the least expensive is at the top, down to the more expensive at the bottom. Adding the EOC to the City Hall Annex is approximately $500,000. That is also approximately $500,000 less expensive than the next cheapest option, which would be keeping it at City Hall in the course of a renovation, which we estimate that would be $1 million to do. We're also letting council know that in the course of looking at this pricing, our consultant estimated that our current budget for the Annex project is almost $1 million too low. We're going to come back to council to request additional funds when the design is further along and we have more detailed cost estimates so that we can make a better informed request of council. The increased cost due to the addition of the EOC is estimated at $500,000. And we believe there's also an increase of cost of $1 million that will need to be budgeted for. So there are 2 additional action items to consider tonight. Action item number 2 is to effectively increase the amount of money that is available for the design and engineering professional services. In June, the contract was awarded to Dialogue, and they have given us an ad service to add the EOC to the project for $65,000. That would takes up the entire $65,000 contingency that is existing. So we're asking council to increase the allowable contingency on the contract by $101,000, $101,700. So that is basically 166 is the original 65 plus another 101. And the other action item is that we are asking council to authorize the execution of a new contract for this project between the city and Cumming Management Group for construction management services. Their services will include cost estimation, design management, construction management, commissioning, and sustainability reviews. Thank you for your consideration. Director Matt Morley and I are available for any questions you might have.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Susan. And I do want to thank Director Morley for his efforts here. Matt, did you have anything to add to this before we open it up for public comment? And I'm seeing a no, so nothing? Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, absolutely. So let's go ahead and move it to our members of the public. And I'll remind everyone that you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please raise your hand in Zoom before the first person is done speaking. And there are 2 other ways to go ahead and input your comments for this agenda item 2 on our special meeting. That is a blue card live or a email to our city clerk at cityclerk, all one word, at cupertino.org during the time the first person is speaking. And so our first public commenter is Jenny. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay, because Darcy, I'm sorry, Mayor, you had kind of gone downwind and then back up again. But yes, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much for staff. I'm really, really glad that the city had the foresight to purchase this building. I think that it's very important that Cupertino have area and land available to do its due diligence in terms of city government. And I think this was money very, very well spent. I think it's a really good idea to move the EOC over there. Yesterday was the 32nd anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was at Pianza College at the time, 5:10 in the afternoon. And the de facto center for De Anza was the on campus. It was campus security. And I think that having a site that's dedicated to some type of a situation, like when you have a major earthquake or you have an event like we had at the quarry, or you have any type of situation happening, a fire, etc., you need to have a really, really good dedicated command center. Also remember that personnel are going to have to possibly sleep there for several days, etc. So you may need to think about having adjacent areas where people can possibly sleep, get food, etc. Because you're going to be having to coordinate with your fire, police department, rescue, paramedics, etc. And I think that having a separate facility that's dedicated to this is very, very important. Apple will be one of the large, you've got the 2 Apple campuses that are going to be command centers if something happens. You have the neighborhood centers, etc. But I think this is really, really good planning in case something does happen, and it will eventually, hopefully not now. I just was wondering if there was any way you all could expand the upstairs area to try to make this into possibly more space upstairs. I don't know how you do that. And I was just wondering about the wheelchair access into the building and whether there was an elevator in the building. Anyway, a really, really good plan. And I think Cupertino should look to buy other buildings adjacent to this, possibly, because the city will grow and we have a lot of business. The other thing is too, we're going to be having many, many multi-story buildings going in the city in the future. And we are going to have to remember that when we have potential emergencies. So I'm glad the EOC will be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And so before I bring it to our members of council, how about we bring it back to Susan and Matt to address the member of the public who posed a couple of questions, first about the second floor, and then second about being able to perhaps, I'll let you guys answer the question. It's eluding me, even though it's the second one. Wheelchair accessibility and elevators. Thank you, Councilmember Woolley. And so Actually, before I go to that, I want to thank our members of the subcommittee for their diligence and work on this. I know you've spent a lot of hours with staff as well as staff for making this happen. So Susan and Matt, questions from the member of the public?
Thank you, Mayor Paul. I'm happy to take that question.
Great.
They're both related topics, actually. So we do not have an elevator in the building. We were trying to be cost effective. It's a small building, so having an elevator is a lot of money for just a little bit of gain. And also for that reason, the second floor, we're using, there's a part of the building code and the accessibility codes that is called equal facilitation. You are allowed to have something on the second floor as long as there are equal facilities provided on the first floor, so that someone in a wheelchair isn't missing out by not being able to get to the second floor. So we're applying that rule in this case. There are workstations, and that's, the workstations upstairs and downstairs. And we also want to balance the amount of space we're using upstairs, because we're trying to keep the overall space open and flexible. So having a second floor go the whole space is not that much of a gain. It won't give us that much more space because you can't occupy the areas under the eaves. So we're balancing that with the openness downstairs and the improvement of the space in general. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Susan. And let me check in with our city clerk really briefly for any blue cards or any emails that might have come in.
No, Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's go to our members of council. Any questions or comments of our presenters, or a motion with regard to the recommended action, perhaps? Vice Mayor Chow, you have your hand raised, and Councilmember Woolley, second. All right, great.
So thank you for a great report, and the visual really helps, and the comparison with between buildings and the Sunnyvale Eoc, that's really helpful, and the comparison of the cost. And yeah, thanks the subcommittee to examine 7 locations and come up with this most cost-effective, I think very logical one. But I do have a question about the increase in cost. My understanding from the pre-meeting from the staff report is the increase is due to a 50% increase in construction cost, but that wasn't mentioned in the presentation. In the presentation, the reason given was we would need all these construction management, cost management services. That I thought that should have been included in the original estimate. So I hope to understand a little more what was in the original $3 million budget, and what portion of that original budget actually increased, so that we need to allocate, I think, so what's the total budget now?
Okay, thanks, Vice Mayor Chow. And if anyone on staff, I believe I know the answers to those questions.
I think $500,000
yeah.
is for EOC, but the total besides the EOC is another $1.5 million, right? So it's $4.5 million total is the project.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Does that include the EOC or not?
Yes, that includes the EOC.
So 4.5 total include the $500,000 from adding EOC.
Yes.
So that means the original project budget increased from $3 million to $4 million. So an increase of $1 million, and I can understand the increase in construction cost, but I couldn't understand if a $1 million is because we all of a sudden think we need all these management services. So maybe I misunderstood the presentation. Please clarify.
Thank you. The $1 million is not the increase of the consultant services per se. It is the increase of construction and a better estimation of the cost of the move, the logistics that we require to get staff into this location. So that is just an update, and it's not because we're adding consultants. We always plan to have consultants. Does that help? Does that clarify?
But the recommended action does not mention the increase in construction at all. The recommended action is adding an additional 1 million additional contract for management services for almost $500,000 for, but it did not mention anything about construction cost. So
Yes.
this is where I
um,
don't understand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We decided we have a $3 million budget, and the current consultant contracts can be taken care of as a part of that existing funding. We are giving council notice that in the near future, probably in the next, with the CIP presentation in the early part of 2023, we will be coming back to ask for additional funding for this project. We decided to not ask for it tonight because we don't have enough good information. We'll have much better information when the plans are better developed, and we've gotten a chance to do better cost estimates based on those plans.
Okay, so for a $4 million project, we are spending about $500,000 on management. Is that a normal amount?
Unfortunately, it is.
It
This
is.
very- it's
Okay.
news to me, but it is the norm. It has been the norm for a couple of years now that these contracts are quite
Thank you.
expensive.
Okay, thanks, Vice Mayor Chow. Next, we have Council Member Willie, I believe, was after Vice Mayor Chow, and then Council Member Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I'm very impressed with your PowerPoint or in your presentation. Also really impressed with what I see is your usage of space. I like the vaulted ceiling. I mean, that really, I think, brings it, to what we consider the new way of doing stuff. Just like here in Community Hall with the high ceilings, it just, I think, really makes it, look very modern. But a few questions that I've got that I think, would kind of help to touch on. So you said that the building today, as we bought it, is not code compliant. So the first question that would jump out, if somebody bought the building like we did and just decided to use it as is, are they required to make code compliant changes, or it's because we're going to be doing a certain amount of work that it requires us to bring it up to code compliance?
Thank you, Councilmember Welly. That is accurate. We are not required to upgrade the building if you're just moving in. If you're doing any work, work more than replacing the carpets, any work that requires a building permit, you're changing the use or you're expanding the building, then you are required to make the building compliant with the building codes, energy codes, accessibility codes, etc.
Great. So then going off on at that point, so I'm kind of assuming, but I think it'd be kind of good to have you kind of lend a little bit more credibility to it. The $4.5 million, I mean, you're going to be really doing dramatic work in the main work area by removing the ceiling, removing all those unnecessary beams or joists or things of that nature. You're going to be bringing it up to the code compliance. You're going to be redoing the front porch, adding the benches. I mean, more or less, I'm just trying to roughly come up to $4.5 million. Because it's an EOC, you're going to be needing to add the backup power that's going to be required for it. I don't know if there's anything else that would jump out at the $4.5 million figure. Maybe you'd just comment on that.
So it's basically a gut of the existing building. It is a wood stick, as they call it. It's what you build houses with, and we will need to seismically upgrade it. But we're adding wood sheathing at some locations. All of the windows and doors need to be replaced to be energy efficient and code compliant. New bathrooms, the plumbing is always a significant cost, and those finishes. We're trying to make our finishes and material selections both sustainable and reasonable, but still good looking. I've dealt with that type of dynamic before, but we will be spending the money mostly on the infrastructure in this case.
Great.
Hopefully that.
So maybe the next question, and more or less just trying to, make a few of these other things visible there. So our safety director, Thomas Chin, and so being in charge of the EOC, so to speak, I mean, it was really great that you had him come and join us for the City Hall seismic discussion, or was it, the seismic discussion. And so we got to hear from him that he was very happy with your layout. I'll let you kind of describe, how he felt about it.
Yes, thank you. We reached out to all the department heads and the significant people in those divisions to get better information about how staff functions, and we learned quite a bit. Actually, you'd think I'd know everything since I work in the building, but we learned quite a bit. And talking to Tom was also most illuminating, just because he gave a very good vision as to how things function. And so we did work hand in hand with him on the development of this program. And I think it would be easiest if EOC was in the City Hall, but this is a very close second. And he's very excited about having a dedicated space for the EOC. So I think I can say that he's quite happy with this development.
Great. So then the what I consider to be the $1 million question, and that is, moving it over to the city manager. I mean, she's the one that's going to, be coordinating or placing where all the staff goes and taking advantage of City Hall's extra space. I mean, the old council chambers becomes new space for her to fully use. The downstairs at City Hall with the diesel engine and its support structure is all going to be taken out and provide more space. And so, a few comments from the city manager. How does she see this new chapter for City Hall?
Sure. Through the mayor, and thank you,
Sure.
Councilmember Willie. If I can smile bigger, I would. So I think this says it all. It's very exciting to know that we have a close option, and this is viable, and that we'll have more room to play with and more space to play with to house all of the staff available in City Hall. And I think the beauty of this location, it's within walking distance. So when I walked over with Susan and Matt about a week ago, I was more than excited and seeing the endless opportunities that we have at this junction.
Excellent. So then if I have just another minute,
Sure,
a couple
go ahead.
things to touch on that I think really makes Cupertino good, providing that we do follow. All electric. I mean, gee whiz, the Sunnyvale has touted their new city hall as being all electric. I can't remember who it was who came and talked when we were on the reach codes, I think, but all electric. And the EV chargers, will there be 1 or 2 EV chargers added as part of that $4.5 million? And then lastly, the landscape, I see this as being another opportunity to go with native low water usage landscaping. Right now it's all grass. Well, it's got a lot of grass and stuff. And I would think we could actually take the opportunity to look at the current water usage and then what would be the water usage or reduction that would materialize with a native plant vegetation aspect. And that would actually, I think, give our community an idea of how they could apply the changing of their own landscaping on all the residential houses, maybe even city buildings, and the benefit that you can get, and have this example right there for them to look at and say, wow, I could do that. I like it. So maybe just a quick comment on those I think would be great, and then I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. I can, if it's all right with the mayor, I can comment on a few things.
Sure, please.
The building will be all electric. The EV chargers, we'll wait and see, but I don't see why we wouldn't have EV charging. It seems like a very smart thing to do. The landscaping is part of the design team's scope of work, and we're definitely going to look at more better water usages, plants as well as systems. We're trying to definitely address that. And it's a great thing that you point out that this building can be a good example for so many things. Under council's direction, we can use this as, we could say, a good example for the public. We can put in educational signage on the inside to show what different measures that we are implementing. There's some just great opportunities in this building, the way it's shaping up. So thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Next we have Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. I want to really thank Susan and Matt for the report, and there's very little for me to comment on, but I kind of follow up with what Councilmember Willie was saying about the planting. So I was looking at PDF 314, and I want to make sure that we do have a specification that there's a preference for California native plants. The reason being is that I'm not sure that we got in early enough on the Memorial Park planning. So I want to make sure that that is going to be included. And then there's a section about the drainage, and I want to also make sure that we're using bioretention, because there's a sentence here where it was like you could make sure that no runoff goes to the parking lot, and I'd like to have that specified more directly. So as opposed to it could be, but we're going to try to design it so that we do have a bioretention space. And I wish I had more to question about, but really the report was so complete, and I'm really excited. You didn't talk about the back patio area, but it looks very promising, and I think we're all going to be pretty excited when this gets built. If we don't have any other hands raised, I can move the recommended action. Do you have more questions? Yeah. Then, okay.
Okay, great. So we have Vice Mayor Chow that would like to, I think, make some more comments, but I'm going to go ahead and point out a couple of things. This project is something that we were responding to the need for new City Hall office space, and so of course, if you take the entirety of our old City Council chambers, which has been transformed into an emergency operating center, which is not ideal, it actually saves quite a bit of space because the old chambers were able to accommodate members of the public, and so the seating was fairly significant. And then, of course, building and permitting to a degree is going to be transferred over, and so you're talking about a fairly substantial number of the employees that would be moving over to 10455 Torrey Avenue. One thing that I would say with regard to the costs and the differential of an emergency operations center, two things to consider. We purchased a new building, and so of course that is part of the city core of assets. But beyond that, you also have the fact that any estimate that you have for something like City Hall at $40 some odd million would correspondingly increase as well. And so that's not built into, the estimates for, how much that would cost. And then, as well, if it were to have been a renovated City Hall, you'll recall earlier this year, we were asked to consider near the end of the fiscal year a $4 million, allocation just to conduct a design study for a parking garage out behind Community Hall here, which, if it went through, would have led to another $20 million allocation for an external garage for the structure itself. And so those costs are fairly significant when you compare it to the acquisition cost of this building, as well as, what is, in my opinion, a relatively, incremental and certainly compared to the cost of the other option we were looking at. Because if you put the EOC inside of the City Hall, you have additional costs to make sure that it is, a building that can accommodate it. And so I wanted to make those points and, thank staff for, clearly changing course and following the direction that had been laid out over the years by City Council. I think that it's a tremendously judicious one, an effective one, and cost-effective one. So at this point, I'll go ahead and move it over to Councilmember Way. You haven't had an opportunity to speak yet, and so I'll go ahead and yield the floor to you before we bring back to Vice Mayor Chow for her next round of comments.
So I have a very quick question. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have a approximate timeline that you can show us what this would be completed?
Thank you,
think
Councilmember Way.
Yeah, thank you.
We are hoping to have updates, have the design make some progress by the end of the year, and come back to council with an update when we do the CIP program for the next fiscal year. The design process will probably continue, including documentation, the contract documents, until summer. We'll get a permit and then try to go into construction. I don't see a move-in until the following year, 2024. Director Morley is making that a mantra that let's get this done as quickly as possible. But we're definitely taking any opportunity we see. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Susan. Thanks, Councilmember Way. And Vice Mayor Chow, you have a follow-on round of comments, questions?
Yeah, two questions. First is earthquake retrofit. This building was built in 1970s. I'm just curious. I didn't hear we need to do any earthquake retrofit. So, or is that part of bringing the building to standard?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The EOC, the addition of the EOC is going to require a seismic upgrade. If we were to move in, when we move in and do some renovation to the building in any case, that would require a seismic upgrade. The addition of the EOC requires an additional level of seismic strengthening of the structural systems. And we're also, with the addition of the EOC, going to have to make sure that the HVAC, for example, will remain operational in the course of a seismic event. So those things are all folded into the new program and the cost estimates that we're bringing to you.
And so is that already included in the $500,000 estimate, or the additional construction cost is not included?
The addition of the EOC and the additional seismic upgrade work that will be required to make this building what's called an essential facility, that is the $500,000 that we mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay, great. So second question is, so construction cost increased 50% from last year. If this building, we are taking 1 year to finish the design, starting the construction next summer, and expected completion 2024, do we expect the construction cost to increase when we approve the budget next June? Another 50%? And so another thing is this a general construction cost for all kinds of projects, or for the specific kind of construction needed for this building?
Thank you for the question. As part of our work to look at the different locations for the EOC, our cost management consultant took a look at an earlier cost estimate that another consultant had provided when we came up with the program for the Annex building. And at that, in the course of looking at the EOC program, he took a look at the overall cost estimate and said, this isn't high enough. So when he gave us the updates, I can't say specifically in this case because it was still a very rough cost estimate, but generally they have a history of giving us information that accounts for escalation and for schedule. So, for example, when we looked at City Hall last year, they gave us different prices depending on when it start construction because there's every year has an escalation, as you mentioned.
Oh, so the current estimate took into account of potential escalation by next June when we actually start. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Mayor. And I see Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised. Did you want to put a motion on the table at this time, Councilmember Moore? There are no further hands raised at this time.
Sure. I move the recommended action.
Let me call on Councilmember Willie. Did you, as a member of the subcommittee, would you like to go ahead and second this?
Thank you. That went right over me, but yes, thank you very much. Okay. I second it.
The recommended action is moved and seconded on the table. Are there any of my colleagues that would like to comment on this motion at this time? Well, I think that it gives us a tremendous amount of options, and I really look forward to being able to see this space evolve over time. One thing I wanted to mention was the possibility. I'm grateful that Councilmember Willie brought it up. The idea of charging and going all electric. Really exciting things happening in the next upcoming years and decades in this space. And I think that one thing to think about is maybe the concept of bidirectional charging and the fact that if we're having perhaps emergency vehicles parked here, there might be some fairly significant amounts of battery storage in these vehicles. And there's a whole slew of possibilities that open up in those synergies. So if there are no other further comments on this item, we have the motion. It's on the table. There's a second. Madam City Clerk, could you please conduct a roll call vote? Unless my council colleagues would like to vote with your lights. Whatever is pleasure of the group, let's go ahead and conduct the roll call vote.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Well, thank you very much, folks. We're at 6:17. We will go ahead and adjourn our special meeting. Our regular meeting starts at 6:45. We'll see you then. Thanks very much.